But the goal with this is really to talk about, as Julie said, the engine, right? What is it? What's the framework that allows us to consistently approach prospecting regardless of what's going on in business or the world around us? The key to success in any prospecting endeavor is that consistency. It's consistency of the behavior combined with the efficacy of the content you're putting into the engine and putting out. And so without further ado, let's jump to the next slide and we'll get started here. So the reason that when you look at your prospecting, right, and the reason that it is potentially not as effective as you want it to be, there are a couple of things, right, a couple of reasons that we typically see. It's still, people still meet with sellers, you know, people still have conversations. They still have business objectives and business issues that they have to resolve or contribute to. They still have problems they need to solve. The challenge is that we need our prospecting to be about their problems, right? Our prospects' problems, not ours. The vast majority of prospecting that happens towards me is somebody coming to me and trying to talk to me about what they're doing. And I don't know about anybody listening to this, but I don't do real well when I'm being talked at instead of talked to. When somebody isn't showing the empathy or the understanding of what I may myself be going through. So the first challenge is perspective, right? We need to make sure that we switch our perspective to really try to understand what's going on with that other person, not only from a professional standpoint, but in days like today, what's going on in the world that may be impacting the way they're viewing their business. So this requires a bit of emotional IQ. The second most effective reason for ineffective prospecting comes down to content, right? So content is the way that we communicate, it's the way we make an impression, whether that be the way we engage in a phone call, the way we sound when we talk, the way we write, the way that we engage on social networks. And it comes down to how that content represents us and the content that we're sharing with them. We want to meet them where they are in their buying process. Now, we may not know initially, and this is where the technology such as Outreach, Sales Loft, and all these other tools come in to help us do A/B testing around what is working, what's resonating, what's not. But we have to make sure that we're putting in the time to understand that the content we're creating is going to be, and they're going to bring their own perspectives to it. We have to do our best, understand those perspectives, and then mirror that in the content that we put out. Now, the content that we put out needs to be valuable to them, not to us. It can't just be self-aggrandizing, hey, look at me, I'm so cool. The quality of the content is typically the third reason that we see where organizations are ineffective in their prospecting. And this becomes a bit of a challenge, especially as things change, especially as business objectives evolve, business issues change. It's about making sure that we understand them and demonstrate that. It's not just enough to make sure you're sending out content that is well written and grammatically correct and spelled correctly, or you're speaking correctly when you're talking to them on the phone. The quality of the content has to be around correlating to their problems, right? We have to be able to demonstrate that we're listening to their needs, that we're not being pushy. And that's especially important now. We have to be empathetic. We're here to help. You have to approach this with a positive intent. You have to have the mindset of positive intent that you are here to help. You're curious and finding ways that you can help. And you have to be able to demonstrate you have relevant information to them, that will be relevant to their industry, to their role. And you also have to respond in a timely manner. If you don't respond fast enough, somebody else will. And that becomes the making sure that the quality of the content isn't a one-off thing. We want to think about it holistically. We want to think about it as we go through this to make sure we're understanding what that entire buyer journey is and make sure we have content that connects to them at each step along the way. Now, Vortex in general uses a concept called priming memory that is an underlying psychological approach. It's based off of research out of Stanford. Some may know it as mere exposure effect as well. And basically, this is a psychological reality that the more the human brain sees something, the more they attribute truth or familiarity to it. And so everything that we do in our outreach, in every activity we take is designed to prime the memory. A lot of people will make the mistake and say, oh, my whole goal of outreach is to schedule a meeting. And that may be how you're comped. It may be what managers look at. It may be what's measured or what organizations really kind of dial down into. However, what we're after is information. we're after information, and we're after a priming effect. So if we focus on those two things, it makes the grind of prospecting a little less painful. And the idea is that if they see your name, email address, phone number, company name consistently, then they're going to start to attribute familiarity to it, especially if the content you're putting out there is of the quality and focus on them that allows them to know you understand who they are. Now, in order to pull this off, it requires focus. It requires focus on the individuals that we're going after. It requires focus on our own selves, on our way that we're engaging with the content, the way that we're putting it out there. We need to make sure that we're approaching prospecting with the right mindset, right? This is the hardest job in sales, right? And don't let anybody tell you it's not. If you can master prospecting, the people that have worked for me have gone on to make more money in their careers as they've progressed up the ladder because they understand the fundamentals of consistent multi-channel prospecting. It requires a sense of focus. Inside of
Chad, you know, it's really interesting because I think back to when I was a direct sales manager and some of my reps that outperformed by far some of the other reps on my team. And it came down to, I think, all of these factors: focus, priming the memory, and the three content quality that we talked about earlier. Because they would tell me that sometimes they got to the buyer at the right time. Well, the timing is the one thing we can't always predict, but the more activity we have, focused activity with the right messaging, the higher the likelihood that we will be top of mind when the timing is right.
Absolutely. And we need to make sure that we're doing it. Again, that goes back to the consistent. You may hit somebody when they're not focused on a problem you can help them solve, or you're showing them that you understand a problem that isn't the top of mind for them. But as they go through the progression of normal business, everything changes as we've seen. And so those problems and those things are focused on can change. So if we're consistently focused on showing them we know them, and we're using a multifaceted, multi-channel approach to that, we also get around the predisposition that some people have. Some months they like to pick up the phone, some months they like to engage socially, sometimes they like to engage via email, and those stats change. They cycle as people's expectations cycle. And so in Vortex, we use a concept called the sphere of engagement, right? And this is where your content's going to go out. And this is where mastering the best practices in each of these 6 areas will serve you in your career as you progress. Now, nobody's gonna be perfect at it out of the box. I'm over 1 million cold dials into my career. I can't even tell you how many emails I've sent out. And I can tell you, I crapped the bed a lot and have made a lot of mistakes. But relying on and understanding that there are really 6 kind of channels that we can leverage: social, email. Inside of email, I include snail mail or mailers of any description, and then phone. Those are one-to-one relationships. That's me reaching out to an individual, engaging with an individual, attempting to show an individual that I understand them, I understand what they're up against, and I have information and or insights and or a solution that will help with that. Then we also have events, networking, and groups. Events, everybody should be familiar with. We're not having a lot of those today, at least unless they're virtual. Networking is going to become even more critical. This is a way of making sure that my network is reliable, right? Everybody has a tendency to want to turn LinkedIn into the Facebook of business, but at the end of the day, that network needs to be reliable, and that requires some best practices in terms of adding to it, expanding it, and maintaining it. And then groups is just the awareness that prospecting never ends, that you are constantly prospecting. So if I am involved in a volunteer organization or an animal rescue or something like that, understanding that I probably am going to run into individuals there and use that as a connection point. Rather than doing it just haphazardly, we want to be a little bit more focused. We want to be a little bit more certain about what we're doing, right? Prescriptive in our approach, but not so prescriptive that we're losing our own authenticity. That's where the content comes in. That's our personalized approach to those individuals as we go through each of these channels. And when we work with clients, we work on the best practices in each of these so that we can up level the game there. But the goal is, once you understand how those channels interact with each other, you then have the ability to create cadences, which is where we're going to head today, that are targeted to those individuals. First step is proper preparation. And in proper preparation, it's mindset. Mindset rules all. I don't know, Julie, you've probably seen it as well. You can tell someone who has the right mindset, who's focused on doing things the right way, getting themselves psyched up and in the zone, so to speak, versus those that haven't.
Well, absolutely. I mean, attitude is key for all of this. And as you mentioned earlier, Chad, this is hard. Sometimes it feels like drudgery. And if we don't have the right mindset, then it's easy to get discouraged, get frustrated. And when we get discouraged and frustrated, we find excuses not to do it anymore. So understanding that mindset, having that proper attitude, preparing ourselves is just as important to preparing the content and preparing the messaging and preparing what we're going to do.
And once we have that mindset, we have to hold on to it, right? The mindset will dictate the way that your content, the communication of your content, right? It will come through in your tone of voice. It'll come through in the way you structure your sentences. And so once you've got that mindset, then it's time to do some research. And this is an area where I see many people spend far too much time. Now, I've had workshops, and some of you listening may have been in those workshops, where I get challenged on this a lot. But if you are focused, if you are completely focused on doing research, meaning you've turned off Slack and email and all this other crap, if you're focused on doing the research, it should only take 15 to 20 minutes. And 15 to 20 minutes is all you need to do the research around a role-based or industry-based persona. Once you've done that, right, this technique for doing that focus is called time blocking, and it becomes the key for every element, I would argue, of a sales professional's life. We have a tendency to let our calendars rule us instead of letting our calendars be a tool for us to be more efficient and more successful. Being busy does not necessarily equal productivity. And so what we want to do is break our day up. The average that I aim for is 40 to 45% of my day is time blocked out. One of those is a call block. One of it may be research. One of it may be prepping content. One of it may be doing analysis on how last week went, how my outreach went. But we need to make sure we have focused time blocks to do that. Now, many people are working from home. If you're working from home, that presents different challenges. But it's even more critical now to manage the time rather than let the time manage us. And I don't know, Julie, if you have any best practices that you've seen or would like to share with them around that practice as well.
Well, I think one of the beauties of time blocking is thinking of your calendar holistically. So as you mentioned, Chad, thinking about that 40 to 45% that I know I'm time blocking, those become the non-negotiable aspects on my calendar. So that when something comes up, and something always comes up, a phone call comes in that you need to take, now you may have to have online huddles with your managers or reach out and stay connected. Hopefully this social distancing doesn't turn into social disengagement for any of us. So things are changing, but those become the non-negotiable time. So if I know I have a time block that I'm trying to do calls, outreach every day, I now have the power to move that rather than cancel it. But it's that mindset and thinking about that calendar a little bit more holistically. If something's on my calendar, I know I get it done. I try to calendar my workouts, especially now, knowing that I've got a calendar. I got to get out of this house and go for a walk at some point. I have got to get away from my children for a little bit to keep my sanity. And so I've got that on my calendar as that non-negotiable time. And I think prospecting, we have to be that diligent and deliberate with our time blocks as well.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, I can't get out of the house because it's snowing like a son of a gun here in Denver. But once we have the time blocks and once we start the prospecting, it's all about asking questions. It's all about asking informed questions, right? We're talking about uncovering the value that someone else is currently focused on. What is their perception of value? Now, the research that we do and it will allow us to start to target that, but it's basically an informed best guess. What we need in prospecting is we need the tools that allow us to measure what's working and what's not, what problems are resonating or are not, but they need to be informed questions. Everybody out there probably has Amazon Prime or a bunch of other things that deliver and provide these types of frictionless experiences. People want that from their prospect and they want that from their sales professionals. And the key to that is making sure that you're asking not only questions, but that they are informed questions. And so there's ways that we can increase the effectiveness, right? We want to make sure that we increase the focus. We talked about time blocking. That's critical element of it. When we do the research, it really only needs to be 15 to 20 minutes, right? 10 minutes on a company, 10 minutes on a person. That's it. You go hit and see if you can find a business objective for the organization, or if you look at their 10Ks or some report from the annual report where the CEO makes some statement, then 15 to 20 minutes on industry trends that the roles you're targeting. If it's high quality third party content, key there being high quality and third party, allows us to then reverse engineer into what are the particular problems that the role we're targeting or prospecting may be facing. And then once, if we're doing an account based approach, then we can do a little bit of research on the person, combine the industry research with the company research and the personal research for greater personalization. Then we want to make sure inside of that time blocking that we're creating strategically choreographed outreach. And a lot of people have a tendency to focus on Vortex prospecting and think only of the call blocks, right? Vortex is much more than the call blocks. Call blocks is where we see the largest amount of fear. We see a lot of pushback, but it is still, according to the research, the most effective way to get a conversation started. And so for us, call blocks are a part of the cadence. They have to be a strategic part of the cadence, as does personalizing the emails to the role and the individual, or to the, the role in the industry that you're going after. We want to make sure those social interactions are targeted to those people. And we want to make sure it's all being tracked. If you can't measure it, you can't track it, you can't analyze it and evolve. Now, all of this is, in the reason we do this is based off of role in industry, is based off of Dr. Cialdini's work. If anybody's read, there's a book called Influence, where he talks about, and they've done experiments where they find that people in professional places identify themselves with their role first, right? And so if anybody wants to read Influence, it's definitely a book I would check out. Once we have the understanding of the role, we've done the research, we're already in the right mindset, then we got to make sure we have the right tech stack in place. We got to make sure that we have the tools. Everything needs to be recorded, because look, I'll be the first to admit, nobody wakes up in the morning and says, wow, I can't wait to engage with my Salesforce automation tool today. Said no one ever. The fact of the matter is, though, it becomes our memory. It becomes our ability to scale and to evolve quickly. And if we don't have that data, then we have a tendency to get into situations where we're kidding ourselves, or telling ourselves or believing that we did things we didn't do, or we did certain things a certain way. And we want to make sure that we have that tool set available to us. From the tool set, and I'm sure every organization has it, but from the tool set, the next most critical component is how you're prepping your lists. Now, data is the challenge for the vast majority of people. You'd think with all of the data out there, this wouldn't be the largest challenge, but it turns out to be. Some organizations will clean and compile lists for SDRs, BDRs, prospectors. Some organizations will make them do the cleaning and the owning of it. At the end of the day, if you don't have decent data, then your engine's not going to run as effectively as possible. So I always implore people that have worked for me or teams that I work with that each individual needs to own their data. They need to make sure they're cleaning it. They need to make sure they're prepping it, they're sorting it, they're familiar with it. Right? At the end of the day, this is who we're going after. We want the information to be as clean and clear as possible, so that those time blocks that we're using are as effective as possible. And we're not getting derailed by constantly running into bad information, incorrect information, things of that nature. Anything you want to add there, Julie?
Chad, what do you think the most important components of that data at a minimum we need as we prepare that list? I mean, obviously we need name, potentially role, the company, the person, any contact information that we might have, whether it's a direct dial phone number, an email. What else do you think needs to be the critical data that we're looking for in preparing these lists?
as we're putting the lists together, I think that hits all of them, right? Ideally, I want a name, obviously a company name, a name of an individual, their title and or role. If I can get an email address, awesome. If I can get a direct dial phone number or a mobile phone number, that's even better. But even if I have to go through a switchboard or an automated system, I just need some place to start, because remember, we're after information in the prospecting process. And so if I can get that core set of information on a contact, that's enough to at least start to go through and begin to bang against that list. And then, you know, as I do my debriefs on a call block or debriefs on an email block, I can clean that up and identify. So over time, taking ownership of my own list prep, of my own data, allows me to have not only the familiarity, but also to understand how reliable it is. So I know how effective my outreach and time blocks will be.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so when we look at why things maybe don't convert, right? A lot of sellers will say that 82, you know, this, I love this stat. Sellers say less than 82% of leads provided by marketing convert to an opportunity. But yet people say they're influenced. 96% of buyers say they're influenced by sellers who focus on the value they can deliver. In the podcast that we run, the B2B Revenue Executive Experience, for 2.5 years, I've asked every guest the same 2 questions at the end of every interview. One of those is, as an executive, how does somebody who doesn't have a referral or a trusted reference into you capture your attention, earn the right, build the credibility to get 13, 15 minutes on the calendar? Overwhelmingly, from executives to whether they be in sales or marketing, or it doesn't matter what industry, they all say the same thing. If you want to talk to me, you got to show me you know me. And so that's number one. The second one that we hear often is somebody who's coming at me to help work with me to solve my problems, not telling me they understand everything completely enough to just solve them out of the box. And that's a critical mind shift for the way that we approach the prospecting stuff. And so when we look at, you know, connecting to individuals, connecting to the consistency that we need in prospecting, we need to make sure that we have a, you know, process for communication, that we understand that. And we want to make sure that that connects to the internal processes, internal sales methodologies that we have, right? Because if you get the meeting, if you qualify them, and then you pass them off to someone who asks them the exact same questions, it makes them repeat themselves again. All that's doing is introducing friction into the sales process. So you have to have a common language to avoid this. Everybody has to understand. There has to be like a common foundation across the revenue funnel. Without it, there's gaps. There's huge gaps. There's friction. And the next thing you know, you might see an increase in qualified meetings set, but your handoff rate drops through the floor because there's not a common language for the handoff, and you're creating friction as you go through it. Are there other things, Julie, that you've seen that you want to point out as well?
Well, I think the key of that we're making here is connecting to the sales methodology, not the sales process. And sometimes I find that some people don't really understand the difference between the two. A sales process is really milestones and really understanding where the buyer is in their decision-making process. So the analogy that someone shared with me years ago was, think of your sales process as the mile yard lines on a football field. Am I in the middle of the field at the 50-yard line, or am I at the 10-yard line in terms of how I'm going to score that goal? The sales methodology is really the how am I moving things through that from the 50-yard line to the 10-yard line to the goal. It's the playbook, it's the skills, it's the tools, it's how you engage with those. And the how becomes really, really important in terms of having that good, solid experience for the buyer as they interact with multiple people in your organization.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Could not agree more. We want to make sure, look, we're all moving 100 miles an hour, and there's a lot of things going on, right? There's a lot of places things can break down, a lot of things where it can get, challenging. But you have to think about your revenue funnel in a way that we want to increase velocity without increasing friction, without making it choppy or gaps or bumpy. We want to make it easy to do business with us. That requires relying on your sales framework, right? Requiring the stages can be whatever. You got to find people, qualify them, educate them, sell them, close them. Everybody may have different cute names for what those stages are, different percentages. But at the end of the day, understanding how to move someone through that with a common framework, common methodology becomes something we can rely on, just as we can rely on the systematic approach to prospecting to drive consistency, which we know at the end of the day is the one thing that sets teams apart, teams that crush it apart from teams that struggle. And one of the core things on the prospecting side that's a little bit different than, let's say, on the sales side is proximity to other individuals, right? So we have a hashtag that I pull up in class. It's friends don't let friends prospect alone. Right. The fact of the matter is, as I said before, this is the hardest job in sales. And now with a complete work from home kind of culture for a while, we need to come up with other ways to ensure that we are still operating as a team. If you're virtual and you're doing a call block, everybody jump into a Zoom or go to meeting room and show your cameras, put them on mute so everybody can see everybody dialing. And at the end, share what's working or not. Or if you're doing, creating what we call prospecting prompters, do it together, get in a virtual room, brainstorm it together, interact, because the energy and the learning, the cross-pollination is what's going to help you ensure that your mindset stays where it is so you can effectively do the research, time block and hold to those, as well as make sure you're developing and asking informed questions and leveraging your tech stack as effectively as possible. From here, we want to move into developing sales cadences. This is bringing it all together, right? And when we talk about sales cadences, it can be, some people call them sequences, some people call them cadences, whatever it is, it's the series of outreach you're going to do. Now, we know the data shows that it takes 15 to 17 touches across 20 to 24 business days in order to get to convert that prospect, either qualify them in or qualify them out, or have not been able to connect with them because we're focused on things that they don't find important. We need to do this across the multiple channels of the sphere of engagement. So it's important to not think that, oh, I'm going to do a call block and that call block operates alone in the wilderness by itself, right? That is part of a strategic cadence. Your email needs to connect to it. Every piece of content, every outreach that you do should have some type of daisy chain. Refer to something that the last piece that you sent. So if I send an email that has value, says, hey, as a CMO, you might find this information valuable, would love to get your insights on it. Or I start with a social interaction. They shared something and I say, hey, really enjoyed, thank you for sharing this, really enjoyed this report. Here's another piece of information that might expand your thinking a little bit, would love to connect and discuss. I'm providing value, but I'm doing it through a different channel. Then when I go back to them 2-3 days later and I call and I leave a voicemail, I'm gonna say, hey, I sent you an email 2 days ago and contained this report. I've got some more information, thought you might find valuable. Here's an interesting stat. I'm going to send you another email tomorrow, see if we can't set up some time. So we tell them what we did, tell them why we're calling, what we want, tell them what we're going to do. You daisy chain all of your interactions throughout those channels together so that there's no misunderstanding, no starting from new. It's the core of the priming element. And so we always want to start with value to them first. And when this slide says, share no ask, that's no hard ask, right? You can ask for their perspective. You could ask for more information. You can make a soft ask, but I'm not on my first 2 outreaches. I'm not going to ask for like 10 minutes on their calendar. I haven't earned that right yet. I haven't shown them enough that I know them. I haven't had the respect for them to demonstrate or attempts to uncover what they find valuable. And so from there, we move into kind of speeding up the amount of times we ask. We use a framework to create our content called AIM, anxiety, influence, and motivation. We want to create a bit of an emotional reaction, demonstrate that we can help them solve that, and then motivate them to have a conversation. Now, this is where I'll throw a little timely perspective in. Everybody right now is highly anxious. So we have to be very careful and very empathetic with the way that we reach out to people. But we want to make sure that we are consistent in the way that we do it through the channels that we go after. Some people will have different reactions and we don't want to poke the bear, so to speak. Anything you want to add on the cadence creation there, Julie?
No, I think, again, I think this is a framework for us to look at. And, one thing that we do know is for a lot of people that would be our potential clients, over the long run, they are anxious about their own situation. Everybody's in uncharted waters right now. So we want to be very empathetic to that. What does empathy mean? We put ourselves in their shoes. We understand that at least for the short term, it's not business as usual, and we're prepared to sell through this because we will get to a new reality, a new business as usual in the future. So empathy comes in a couple of ways. It comes in how we present as well as what we present.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so let's bring this all together into a couple of examples so you can see how this unfolds. So I'll just use a CMO as an example. If I'm going after a CMO, and what you're seeing now is a portion of a cadence, right? Because again, remember 15 to 17 touches. So in this example, I've done my research. I understand that this CMO in this industry is facing potentially these industry trends, which could generate these types of problems. And I'm going to focus each week of my cadence, my outreach, my content on one of those problems. Typically, when I do the research and reverse engineer it, we're looking for 4 or 5 problems, and we want to focus on all of our content each week on one of those particular challenges to see if we can make a connection. If we don't connect first week, then we can switch it and go to the next one. But this shows you how we start with that interaction to share, to build credibility. Then we start to connect those insights that we've shared with them, those industry challenges or potential problems that they're facing and trying to do it, how we can help them solve those problems, how we've solved them for other companies. It's like, hey, we know, based on industry research and this statement by your CEO that you're probably dealing with this type of problem. We helped so-and-so companies solve that, produce these results. Would love to find 15 minutes to see if that makes sense to have a longer conversation beyond that. Something very simple that's going to demonstrate that we can help them solve the problem that we just created some anxiety or provided some insights around. And if that doesn't work the first week, then we recycle. We're going after a second problem the next week, and we do the same thing. We try to show them the industry trend. We show them an insight, combine it with something that their CEO or executive team has said. And we, again, go through the process. Again, it is an engine that we have to keep running. Now, this is what we would do if we were going after, if all you had to do was target, say, a CMO in retail. You'd develop one cadence for that role. Some people do account-based sales. So SDR may be given, 10, 15 accounts that are global accounts, have thousands upon thousands of people in them. And the inclination may be to run the same cadence against each, say, C-level executive, and then develop another cadence and run it against each of the, say, VP level cadences. That's not going to produce the best results because those people do talk. So eventually what could happen is they're having dinner one night or at the water cooler or they're on a virtual meeting and they go, hey, anybody else getting bugged by this guy, Chad? And they start to then all of a sudden erode your credibility without you even knowing it. So what we want to do is use a layered cadence approach when we're going after accounts. So I might develop 2 or 3 or 4 cadences and run them against different levels of people simultaneously in the hopes that I'm not crossing the streams, so to speak. These are actual cadences that I have developed and run. For those that have seen my picture, I definitely have a hair thing since I don't have any. So hair metal, Batman's back, Dr. Seuss, name it whatever you want. Something that's going to help you understand what is the focal point for the cadence. The naming, it's the fun part. So don't pass up on that. It's going to help you have a mental touch point for, hey, this cadence is a little bit more aggressive. It's not as spaced out. It's designed to introduce more anxiety than demonstrate more influence, or vice versa. Understand what those are, and then use the tech stack, the technology, to tell you which one of them is working with what type of role and what type of content's resonating with those types of individuals. Now, I will say one last thing. We get asked all the time, does this work? I can tell you that I have been using this process for, almost a decade now. It's evolved, of course, right? But we always want to make sure if it's working. And for those of you that have met me, I'm only going to do shit that works, right? Because my job is to prospect. I'm a 100% commission sales rep. So I have to prospect, qualify, sell them, close them, implement, upsell, continue to prospect inside of the account. I can tell you that without a doubt, not only does it work, but it works extremely well for those clients that have gone through the program. And we see an increase in connection rates, increase in conversion rates. We see an increase in the number of deals that funnel into the pipeline. And most importantly, what we hear are the comments from these prospects saying, wow, I'm really impressed how well you know my business. And that starts to build the credibility not only for you as an individual, but also for the company that you're prospecting with, and for that relationship between the two organizations as it progresses through the sales process into close and out to that point in time where they realize the value that convinced them to buy in the first place. Anything you want to add there, Julie?
Well, I think because it's a process, and because we're refining it in partnership with the clients to focus on the quality and the content and then the intervals of these conversations, it's also applicable regardless of the role that you're targeting or the industry that you work in. So we've certainly have clients in high tech that have had significant success selling SaaS-based services and technology products and services, but we've also had success in much kind of lower tech, manufacturing, to business services, and the process is applicable when you start to think about how you can engage to get maximum results and impact. And the other thing that I think that we see is when you get this process rolling and you get some success, people have more fun. When we're successful, we tend to have more fun. When it's a grind and we're not getting the results, that's that drudgery piece, right? And it's like, oh, ho-hum, I can't believe I have to do this again. I'm getting nowhere. I feel like the gerbil on the wheel. But the energy becomes really infectious across organizations as they go through this.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, everybody needs to remember one simple fact. It doesn't matter about industry, doesn't matter about role, because everybody shares one common characteristics. Everybody's a human being that you're prospecting to. And these underpinning psychological approaches, from priming memory to mirror exposure effect, the anxiety, influence, and motivation framework for the content creation, these are all based off of the way human beings operate. They're based off of connecting to and understanding another person's perspective. So it isn't about what makes your industry different until you come and say, hey, my entire industry is, being run by AI. You're still dealing with people. And so at the end of the day, we need to focus on that. And the key to the success is respect. At the end of the day, it's all about respect. Respect for yourself. Have you done the prep? Have you gotten yourself in the mindset? Have you cleaned your data? Have you taken ownership of your role in the buyer journey? And it's respect for your management, your organization. Are you using the tools they've provided? Are you showing the respect for what the organization has invested in by engaging in it? And most importantly, are you showing the respect to your prospects by having done enough homework to make yourself relevant, to understand where they're coming from?